Okay, good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Public Health and Safety Committee for Monday, December 19th, 2022 to order. The first order of business on our agenda tonight is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, November 14th of 22, copies of which are in the packets. Any revisions or corrections needed for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Motion from Henke, is there a second? Second from Larson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 2 is to consider approval or denial of various license applications. There are no denial recommendations for this month. In the packet, with them all, we have Class B beer and liquor license applications that were reviewed previously by the Liquor License Review Subcommittee, all of which were recommended for approval. One for Hiawatha Sports Bar, one for the Velveteen Plum, and one for Tuesday's Bar, formerly Angelo's Restaurant. So those are all in the packet, and also a couple of events that are cyclical events that occur every year, Winterfest and Chase and Chocolate. Anybody have questions about any of those items in the batch? If not, I'll take a motion to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff.
Make the motion that we accept.
Okay. We have a motion to approve all by Larson. Is there a second? Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. Those are all approved as well. Item number 3 is to consider the request of Jefferson Street Inn Rental Pool LLC for a permanent premise amendment to their Class B beer and liquor license to include the City Grill Restaurant and Bar. And so we've got some documentation in our packets there, and let me switch over to it quickly. And were these two separate licenses before, or?
Originally, years back, the City Grill had just one license for the entire hotel. Then
Yes.
about a year or two ago, an entity called Rental Pool LLC bought the second floor, so they were a separate entity from City Grill.
So the
and they-
banquet facility, basically?
Yeah, and they
Okay.
got a liquor license for that. Now they are buying out City Grill at the end of December, so that what we're just basically doing is amending the premise back so that it's all going to be under one license.
Okay,
again.
so for the entire building?
And then
Okay.
one regular license comes back to the city that.
The one the restaurant had before?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So does anybody have any questions for Mary about that application? That seems pretty simple. If not, is there a motion to approve the premises amendment? Motion by Denny, is there a second?
Yes, second.
Second by Larson. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That passes as well. Item 4 is discussion and possible action regarding a report on Lemongrass Restaurant's canopy structure results for the 2022 summer season. You'll recall last season, we allowed Lemongrass to construct a canopy across the sidewalk in front of their restaurants and then seat tables on both sides of the sidewalk. And we had never done that before out across the right-of-way, so we asked inspections to give us a report about what, if anything, was problematic with the arrangement before we would allow it more than once. And so you have the report in your packets. It looks like it was an uneventful season and that it went well. So does anyone have any questions on that at all? Because we'll place that. Go ahead.
I'm assuming this has been removed by now?
It was taken down in October. We only
Okay,
allowed it
yes.
through Halloween, and
Yes.
then for the winter, it has to be gone. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, so it looks like it went well. At the end of the report, it looks like the goal is to allow it every season for the warm season, so. Go ahead, Nate.
And so when we did it by the ordinance change, it is permanent now, and it was do we then put it back? So we don't need to make any other actions. We don't
Oh,
need to
good.
change any more
Then we don't have to
ordinances.
reconsider it every
Yeah.
spring either, so that's helpful.
Yep, so it's basically good to go.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for that. So we'll place that report on file then. Item 5 is discussion and possible action on an ordinance creating Chapter 10.41 electric scooters. And you'll see that you've got some documentation in your packets and the minutes of the Bike and Ped Subcommittee talking about electric scooters. A number of cities are starting to allow these now because places rent them. I think there's been an approach from a company that would like to rent some in the downtown area, maybe along the riverfront. And we've got Andy Lynch with us tonight if you have questions for him but his report is in the packets. Does anyone have any questions for him? It looks like these would operate curbside like a bicycle, or in the bike lanes, and they would be allowed on the sidewalk where we allow bikes on the sidewalk, like Grand Avenue and on bridges and things. So does anyone have questions for Andy about these? Go ahead, Chad.
My only question was the rear marking. I get how you can do that on bicycles, but I'm wondering how that would happen on scooters.
What kind of mark?
The rear marking. It says that it needs a light on the front and then
Oh,
a reflector on
reflector
the back.
yeah.
Would that be way down low by the tire?
yes, it would.
Would-
A lot of bikes have come. Bikes. A lot of the scooters come with instead of a reflector on the back, it's a light.
Would we allow just like high visibility clothing? If they didn't have, I'm just thinking of all the scooters I've ever been on. They were older, so they didn't have those. But
Right. I think I think from what I've seen, any new electric scooters now have a light on the back and the front. Well, I wouldn't say all of them have it on the front, but I think it's easier and much more common to have those already built in.
Assuming that if there were older units still in use, would we want the provision to be able to put a provision in the enabling chapter that says in the absence of permanent rear markings, that high-vis clothing would be acceptable for the operator? Or do you think that will not be enough of an issue that it's necessary?
I really don't. I don't know that there's all that many older scooters out there.
Okay?
Again, this is a little hard to. There's not like a scooter store like there is a bike
Right.
store.
Yep.
You can get these from Amazon or Walmart or wherever. So it's hard to know how many older ones are out there or what they may or may not have as far as accessories like that.
Well, and that is a provision that we could always consider if you find that it's necessary. I mean, if we
That's
try
true.
this for a while as written
Yeah.
and find that there's, a gray area or a gap between that we need to fill with something like that, we certainly could add an exemption if we had to.
Definitely.
Right, so committee members, any questions on these at all? Let's, Lou and then Doug.
How would we license these? Would you put a moped license on them, a bicycle license?
No.
So you don't license them at all? This is just allowing them to operate, but they aren't registered, are they?
Correct. I don't believe there's registration in there. There's not. Actually, this is something we're kind of discussing on the Bike Ped Committee as well, as bike registration. And a lot of communities are actually getting away from that because it's not cost effective and it's only for recovering a bike after the fact. It doesn't do anything on the front end. There are national databases, websites that you can put your bike information on, and then police can check that database if they come across your bike, or so it can be registered in other ways that don't require city infrastructure. So just kind of in a general sense, a lot of communities are getting away from bike registration as well.
That might be actually advantageous more so than having a local registry where you've got either scooters or plates on stuff where, you can get a way wider view if you've got them online. So, okay, so with regard to the scooters, Doug, did you have a comment or a question
No.
yet on scooters?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion then to approve this chapter so that we could allow for these vehicles? Motion
Yeah,
from
I'll
Hanky?
move to approve.
Okay, and second from Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on a resolution supporting membership in the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition. And you'll see you've got some materials also from Andy in that, for that agenda item. This actually follows a few movements that the city has made in past years to try to collaborate and find some collaborative resources where we can, both for information and policy formation surrounding climate issues. So in the packets, You've got a little memo that was written, and you've also got the minutes from the Sustainability, Energy, and Environment Committee that's recommending that we partake in this and have access to these resources to collaborate with other communities who are interested in the same policies. Does anybody have questions for Andy on this at all? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, it says we were invited to join. Who specifically invited us?
The WLGCC.
Okay. They're essentially a lobby group for these issues with the state? Okay.
Yes, they advocate on behalf of local governments, either at the, regarding legislation, so they'll ask for comments from communities, or they'll say here's an opportunity to comment. Often with state or federal legislation, there's a comment period for proposed items, and also they can offer comment to the state, to the utility regulations.
Okay, I read through their mission statement, and it doesn't appear that it's offering any direct support to the city, other than city helping them lobby on their mission behalf, and we may not necessarily agree on all of these mission points.
Sure. So it is optional whether we sign on to an item or not, but they are working on they are working on a local assistance programs, and also, honestly, any group that's willing to help us kind of drink from the fire hose, that is the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, all the different programs and grants available. I'm more than ready to take their help, because there are so many different things that we may or may not qualify for, that just trying to figure those out is a task in itself. But they are looking at the kind of thing that really interested Brad Lenz, the other city planner, and myself, is we're looking in the near future here to develop a baseline of the city's greenhouse gas emissions, find out which strategies will, easily and quickly reduce those, and then look at grant opportunities to fund that and reduce those emissions. This is exactly the kind of group that would help us with that mission.
As far as figuring out what our own footprint looks like as an organization?
They've talked to us about making available some tools that will help in that process, and then also being able to connect with other city leaders, city executives, as far as what's worked for their communities and what could work in ours.
Well, and one of the discussions that we've had previously, I think both in 2018 and 2020, when we've done some similar forward-looking things with regard to the environment as it relates to climate change, is that we did have some discussion that particular issue really affects everybody, and it's really not necessarily about left, right, red, or blue. I mean, it really is, once that damage is done, it's done, and, the science of that doesn't really care which side of the aisle we tend to lean towards. So I know when we took that action, the last one in 2020, we did have some discussion about the fact that some of the things that we're seeing happening are certainly no coincidence, and they're certainly not partisan. So similar, I would imagine that the call to action that a city or an organization or a member would get from something like this isn't much different than some of the call to action items that we see coming from either the League of Wisconsin Municipalities or the Wisconsin Counties Association, where, they're wanting us to contact our legislatures to be either yay or nay on some proposal that's coming to the floor. Whether we do it or not, obviously, is our choice, but I think that maybe that information flow would be similar. Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, if I were to describe this, I would describe it as thought leadership. I know that they've offered really great programming. I know that Andy attended one in Milwaukee where the former deputy director of the Department of Energy was there kind of speaking about some of these issues. So really helpful connections, really helpful to understand kind of the landscape of policy that we could weigh in on if we cared. Really helpful when it comes to grants and things like that. So I would also agree that it's more along the lines of signing on to things things like the league would suggest, although this is through an environmentalist lens. So that's the kind of information. But I found these folks really helpful. Melissa Baldoff, who has been my main contact, is an elected from a southern Wisconsin community. So she also understands what it's like to navigate, local politics too.
Thank you for that. Additional comments? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so, I'm not opposed to signing on to something similar to like the league that will help guide the city. It would seem there are dozens of these type of organizations, and this is setting a precedent, or we're signing on to one, and it's a fairly new organization. I guess I'm reluctant to join that kind of a group, not knowing just what it's going to do to help us, and because I don't see it as a help to us.
Okay. Additional comments or questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the item to get it to the floor, and then we can vote on it? Motion by McElhaney, is there a second? Second by Hanky. Further discussion or questions? If not, members in favor of the item signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No?
Okay. So then we'll indicate that that item has passed 3-2. Let's see, that takes us to item number 7. Discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 8.08.001 definitions, 8.08.120 number of dogs and cats limited, section 8.08.270 penalty, creating section 8.08.171 permitting of commercial kennels, section 8.08.172 commercial kennel permit fees, section 8.08.173 permit application process, section 8.08.174 general permit provisions, section 8.08.175 permit non-renewal, suspension, or revocation, section 8.08.176 abatement of nuisance at commercial kennel, section 8.08.177 general facility standards, section 8.08.178 indoor facility standards, section 8.08.179 outdoor facility standards, section 8.08.180 enclosures, section 8.08.181 feeding and food receptacles. So that's an awful lot of description for an item that says that basically as a city, we would like to issue permits for kennel operators if any wish to set up shop in our city. And however, a standard like that or a permit process like that touches so many different parts of our animal chapter that we have a description that's 1.5 inches long to basically say we would like some capability to register, monitor, inspect, and assure the quality of commercial kennel operation if one were to operate within the confines of the city. I don't believe there are any yet, right, Nate? So,
That I do not know. You'd have to maybe ask Ashley. She might be able to
Okay.
answer that. But the reason for this is because there was interest in a new business to do this, and they were basically the ones asking, okay, so what's the kennel fee? Because there are municipalities that do the fee, and that's when we realized we don't have one. Talking with Ashley, basically doggy daycares, these commercial kennels are not actually regulated by any state entity. So this would, I guess, would allow us to be able to do the inspections to make sure that the facilities are humane and,
up to par.
yeah, nice
Yeah.
for our animals. Because, I mean, if you're taking your dog there, you care for your dog and you want it to be in a safe, fun place. So, yes, the ordinance is quite long because it does talk about many different things. And then obviously if we have to get to a revocation period or a revocation suspension of this fee, like we kind of do with alcohol licensing, being able to abate any nuisance. I mean, obviously you just want to think about the good things, but when stuff goes bad, then how do we deal with it?
Sure.
The one with the indoor and outdoor facilities, same thing, the inspections, and then Ashley would be very involved with approving of the permit before, or doing their inspections before the permit is approved. There are a couple of things that I wanted to, I guess, highlight or touch on from speaking with Ashley about the draft ordinance right now. So, for example, we would need to establish what this fee is going to cost for the year. in my little memo, I kind of put a little sampling of various fees and amounts for things that we do for. This would have to be in a separate fee schedule amendment to that, probably at the next meeting, once we figure out what that amount is going to be. So that's one thing. Another thing is, if a permit were to be revoked or suspended or non-renewed, obviously we have to go through the whole hearing process, kind of like how we do with the license.
Sure.
And one thing that Ashley pointed out is, okay, say we revoke somebody's permit, how long do they have to basically close shop and give the animals back? And I first said, well, we should have a kind of maybe an objective standard, but we could be revoking or suspending on a whole list of things, and some could be not that bad, and some could be very bad.
Right.
So I think maybe we should add a sentence in there about that this committee would be the ones that would set how long, based on what we just heard from that individual case.
From the hearing results, yes.
Yeah, and that would be then identified in the order of, you're closed and the animals are all gone within such and such days.
Sure.
Another thing in here is about if somebody is ever found guilty or convicted of a cruelty to animals sort of crime. Right now, it's written as after 2 years, they can then get they would be eligible to reapply for a kennel permit. Ashley is not comfortable with that. If you are convicted of cruelty to animals, that should be it. You shouldn't be able to
Permanent.
take care of anybody else's animals.
Yep.
So I would have to change that as well. So this is just what I'm pointing out to you, and obviously you guys are the deciding committee on this, and so this is just a draft. Ashley, did I miss anything?
She's looking.
Okay.
I think she's good. Oh, so,
Okay.
I guess, and we'll kind of just see what we think as a committee. I think that the prior conviction item, I think I agree with the humane officer on that. I think that if someone has had prior convictions or charges for that type of activity, the idea that that person may have completely changed their stripes inside of 2 years seems slim. So, I think that we should maybe allow that to be permanent. We'll also have to set a fee as a committee. The list that we have in front of us, we have the pet fancier, the chicken permit, and the bee permit. Those really are personal permits that people have at their home. The other three are business permits, so they're a little more expensive. This operation is likely probably also a business.
Yep.
The question I would have is, does this same or a similar type permit exist at all in Weston? Okay, can you elaborate on that a little bit, Ashley, and know what the price is for it? Because the one thing we've kind of always looked at, we share Ashley with the Village of Weston, and she handles animal enforcement in both communities. And sometimes when those policies are similar in both places, it's much easier for her to do that job in two places. So tell me about that.
Actually, just last year, I sat down with Shane Vanderwall and somebody from the city of Schofield, and we put in place a kennel license.
Okay.
I can't tell you how much it is. The city handles that, unfortunately. I don't have anything to do with that. But this is very similar to the
Okay.
way that one was written up, where we took a lot of the state regulations. So shelters or anybody that sells or adopts out more than 25 dogs a year have to have a license with the state. And so we took a lot of those regulations, which is a lot of what I see in here as well.
Okay, that helps, because I think when we're dramatically different from them, then it's difficult for you to have consistency in going out to do that work. So, Matt?
I would just remind this group that when you look at what the cost is, think about the expectations on city staff to go check on these places, sending staff out to make sure that they're can be inspected, and whatever that looks like, have that reflected in the annual cost for that. I mean, the animal control program ideally, when we started, was going to be an enterprise fund. So as we look at what you're going to charge to at least cover our costs, I think
Sure.
would be worthwhile.
That and, I guess, just an estimation as far as what we expect in the quantity of these. This isn't something that comes along every day that wants to open, but Is it? I mean, have you seen a lot of requests?
I mean, we have a couple doggy daycares. This also encompasses cats, which there is somebody trying to start up possibly a cat.
A cat care type? Okay.
Yeah. And so, and I know recently we've had some inquiries about doggy daycares. I've taken a couple of different phone calls recently.
Okay.
There's only one doggy daycare, though, that I can think of in the city limits. And this would still technically encompass the Humane Society. They would just be exempt from the fees.
Sure.
I mean, realistically, they're not going to get turned down, I don't think, if the state doesn't have an issue with them.
Right.
But based on the definition here, the only other part that I would question is whether this would encompass the any rescue facilities.
I believe as long as they are a domestic nonprofit, then no.
Okay.
It would not, they would be exempted from the fee,
But not the inspection.
not the inspections. The inspection, I think, would still have to take place.
Okay.
And then they would have to then basically, I think it says in there, let this committee know of their, basically their business or their
Right.
plan that they do.
Because right now, so we've got a couple of training facilities. One I can think of is Canine for Patriots recently reached out to me because they had a dog that, for whatever reason they had for an extended amount of time, was licensed to them, but they are not the owners of that dog, and that dog is no longer with them. So they got the renewal notice for the license. He's like, I don't have this. What do we do? And we've kind of always done that a little bit more under the guise of a foster situation and the pet fancier permit.
Okay.
And so I guess we'd have to discuss whether or not that would now fall under pet fancier or the kenneling license.
Right. Well, and pet fancier was always intended for people who want to own more than more than the
Right.
Ordinance permits as far as animals, but for their own personal pet purposes, really. I mean, not for any sort of business fostering or with the intention that they would adopt them to someone else or whatever. I mean, it's just that if you would like to have more pets than what we normally allow, and you check out, okay, the pet fancier was what they are supposed to get, but not if they're in the business of, either rehabilitating or rehoming them.
Yeah, and this only applies to commercial entities. They have to be zoned commercial.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be very distinct of, you're just not going to go down 4th Street and
Sure.
there's going to be a house there with a commercial kennel permit, unless
Okay.
it's zoned correctly like that. Because
Okay.
we do have that in our zoning now, of what a commercial kennel is defined in there already.
Okay.
We just didn't have a permit. I also thought of one more thing, and now I've forgotten. Oh, I looked up West and it's $100.
Yep, the clerk did as well, and she found Schofield's is 100 too.
Okay.
So, given the fact that we all are, kind of on the same page with animal policy normally, with both the enforcement of animal policy and the creation of it, we tried to stay real similar with our animal ordinances and things, because it just makes it easier to work across those community boundaries when things kind of all make sense and they're not vastly different.
Another thing that Ashley and I talked about that I just thought of too is she said, well, are we going to set like a limit of animals that can be contained in, each specific business? But if you look in the outdoor facility standards and indoor facility standards, there is a part in there that says that each animal is provided adequate, separate, cleanable enclosures. So each building is going to be, I guess, how big ever the building is going to define how many animals they can have. I mean, if they have 4 kennels, they can have 4 dogs. So I think that covers that part.
Okay.
So, yeah, and so that's why we're having the inspections at the front end to make sure of,
Right, and if it didn't seem like there was enough space or
Yep.
enough of anything or whatever, then I would think the recommendation would be that we deny the permit.
yeah.
Or until such situation was rectified. So,
Luckily
Okay.
with their dogs and animals, they're dealing with other people's dogs and animals. And so
Right.
if we're not the ones inspecting, I mean, obviously we inspect, from the get-go. And then by them getting the permit, that also then makes them consent to future inspections periodically.
As needed, so if
Yeah.
there's complaints coming in or something.
But when you're there to pick up your own animal, I mean, your clients are going to be your biggest inspectors.
Well, kind of, extra eyes.
Yeah, so that's nice.
Okay.
The only other change, just looking at this, thinking about what you just said about the separate kenneling, that's not going to be feasible with a, like, doggy daycare. They don't get separate kenneling typically with a doggy daycare. It's usually group play and things like that.
Okay.
So I'm thinking to the one daycare that I can think of in the area that she's got two rather large fenced-in areas that are probably the size of this, and then she's got her fenced-in back outdoor area, but all the dogs commingle.
Okay, I am seeing, so the restriction on the separate is for animals that are kept for
24 hours
24
for
hours or
boarding.
more.
Okay,
So I
I-
guess, yeah, if they're just there for the day, maybe we will have to then identify maybe a square footage,
Sure.
a number of animals per square footage. I don't know what that would be.
I'd have to take
Yeah.
some time to look into that.
Okay.
See if there's anybody else that has any. I think the state has some regulations that's, again, going to be more of the 24 hours, but it might give us a guideline.
Okay.
Well, and I feel like we're on the right path. I think that this kind of gets toward what we were wanting to do a few months ago. And now that we know really what the other two communities are charging for it, would it be beneficial, I guess, if we would hold action on this for this month, bring it back for final action next month, and that would give Nate and Ashley some time to network about the finer points that we've kind of hammered out here on the floor.
Or if anybody else has any other
Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I
suggestions
do
too.
have a comment. To the deputy chief's point, is the $100, will that cover the cost? Is it one inspection? Are we going to be there twice a year? Is it 10 hours worth of work to get it set up?
Well, it's myself and the zoning, or not zoning, I'm sorry, inspections. Both of us are supposed to be out there.
Yep. In theory, it's a single trip unless there's a condition that needs to be
Right.
addressed.
Okay, and there's a provision in here for residents, up to 10 residents can file a complaint if it's a nuisance situation. What are we considering on the front end where we locate these? Can it go to any backyard?
Well, they have to be zoned for it, he said. So you have to,
Has to be commercial.
Oh, okay, gotcha, I'm
So
sorry.
it's not going to be in neighborhoods.
Got
It
it.
has to be zone commercial.
right. And so if someone was trying to do it in a residential area, they'd have to come to the Plan Commission for rezoning.
But doggy daycare potentially is in residential areas right now.
Is it?
So
That's-
again, that's what this is looking to.
Because the one dog, are you speaking to the one doggy daycare that we have currently?
Yes.
Because it's right behind,
Well, I don't know the zoning, so I.
oh, it's
the
right next to
question-
the dog park.
Okay.
I'd have to look, I don't know the address, but that's what this is basically looking to ensure is that doggy daycares is it, somebody just doesn't open it up in their house.
But potentially, so we're looking at, if we have 10 residents, I mean, if it's in a commercial location, it has potential to be in proximity to a residential.
Yep, I mean, there are areas in the city where this part's commercial and kind of across
Right.
the street is residential.
Right.
I mean, that's just, eventually the commercial zoning has to stop somewhere and residential starts somewhere, so.
Right. But though, with the issuance of the permit, I think that is something where, we, as part of the inspection and the approval, if the approval of that permit, includes some analysis of how this is zoned and where it sits in relation to, to a neighborhood, and if it looks like those two things are not going to coexist well, that I think has to be part of the decision-making process as far as whether they get the permit or not in the first place. So,
Yep, and so that's why the inspections office is also involved, because Bill Hebert, obviously, he's our zoning guy, so it's all in their office.
Right, because you have runs that could be, there's setbacks and, okay, I got you. Thanks.
well, that, and then, as far as the fee, this is probably not a daily occurrence for them. So, let's just say if this comes up maybe 10 times a year, or less. This is just not something that is, the other responsibilities that the humane officer has are way more frequent than this type of stuff, right? She has a full schedule to start with everything other than this. So, This just doesn't seem like it's something, I mean, we've been actually kicking this around from a policy standpoint for like 3 months, right? And we've just got it to this point now, and the person that asked has not yet pursued it, so.
And the other thing too is we do have the chronic nuisance still in our back pocket. So anytime a house has been called multiple times for either fire, or not fire, for police or building inspectors, we are allowed to then label them a chronic nuisance and go through that whole ordeal. And so then if they are found to be a chronic nuisance, any other services there get charged at a pretty high rate. So we do have that as well. So if we do have a commercial kennel that starts to become an issue, we would go that route to then cover some cost.
So then to give them some time to finalize both our thoughts on the fee and then to verify the other couple points about doggy daycare and commingled play areas, they can hammer that language out if you guys want to hold on it, and we'll take it in January with a final draft. Is that amenable to everybody? Chad, go ahead. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I like matching the fees. People who run like Rover, would they still be restricted to, it's an online doggy daycare, would they be restricted to their residential standard?
I don't know that they're doing that so much out of their homes as much as they are going to people's homes. My understanding of Rover is that they're going and walking dogs at people's homes and then leaving the dogs there and moving on.
Okay, there's options to leave them overnight also through that website.
Oh, okay. I mean, but how many dogs are they probably taking in at a time?
Right.
Would be my question.
I'm assuming they're just going to stick to the residential. They would
Right.
be, they would be forced to adhere to the residential requirements.
Well, our standard animal limitation, right?
Right,
Which is either,
right.
2 or 3, depending on what else you have in your household, so.
2 dogs,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So,
Okay. Just
yeah.
something else I've been thinking about with all this, so.
Does that standard of 2 dogs per household apply to a dog that's visiting, though, just for a night or two? So I guess that's an issue we've
Right.
experienced in the past and would be my concern with that. So we should research that probably.
Yeah, we had that come up with the one dog hearing where it
The
was
dog
not.
was visiting like daily,
Yeah,
though.
yeah, the dog was visiting for daily or for a month at a time, but it gets a little difficult or gray of, hey, they came for a night. So, and our definition is quite vague.
I find that Rover app similar to Uber kind of, where we really don't license it.
Right, we probably can't. I mean,
Right,
like
right.
Uber and Lyft, we can't, so.
Yeah,
Just-
I mean, they've got their own insurances and
Right.
coverage, so.
Right.
I just personally know people who have dogs over for weeks. People who go to other people's farms and babysit the house basically through that app. So
Sure.
just something.
Okay. Well, and I think that's something too, that once we put it into practice, we can see what the practical application has been. And if we find that it does need some kind of minor adjustment for that as well, I mean, we can think we have it as complete as we want, but, then once we get to work with it for a little bit, we may find that we need to make a minor adjustment here and there, so. But if you guys are good with it, we'll hold it, we'll take it next month.
I think
And then,
Lou-
Lou, go ahead,
I
sorry.
was just going to say that, at first when I came here, I thought I wasn't going to be for this, and I don't know that I am going to be for it, because here we're talking about a problem that doesn't exist, but in listening to this, I would vote to extend this the next month and get the, I just, if other communities are already enforcing this, I guess I would go for it, but otherwise, I would say, why are we even bothering if we have state and federal guidelines to already go by? Thank you.
Go
Can
ahead.
I? Okay.
Yeah.
So in in Weston and Schofield, I do have doggy daycares as well as training facilities. So their kennel license applies there. And the state guidelines do not work as far as training facilities and daycares go, because the state guidelines for that the state comes in and gives the license is only when you are selling more than 25 dogs a year. These people are not selling these dogs. They're bringing them in, they're holding them, and that's where Schofield has had numerous complaints for a facility out there where we're getting barking dog complaints. It's out in the industrial park. But there's barking dog complaints, there's complaints for the cleanliness, multitude of things. And so that was one of the reasons why Schofield chose to do it. Currently, we do have one doggy daycare in Wausau, which has been no issue. I've not had any complaints about. We also do have the Humane Society, which would still fall under this. I don't know, do any of you guys remember when the Humane Society was down on Kent Street and we had Kenny Holzum?
There was all kinds of complaints about barking and things, yes.
I worked
So-
with Kenny Holzum. I heard
Yes.
about it all at work.
All the time. And so it would give us some leverage there where, you know, Kenny was the one and only complainant where this is requiring, 10 residential complaints. So we do have it here. Currently, do we have an issue? No. But it's a whole lot easier to handle it when I've got the tools in hand right away and not retroactively go back or say, okay, you're grandfathered in until we have another issue.
It would make sense to have some framework. I believe in our discussion when this first started, we at one point, Wausau, did have a kennel ordinance or kennel permit on the books. And then when we had made some other animal chapter changes, either because we didn't have any here or there was no demand for it, I believe we got rid of it, right? So we're looking to kind of bring it back,
Yeah.
but then also fine tune it to the needs of modern businesses, which some of this stuff didn't exist back then either, so.
And then when we did have it, it was a very general, vague ordinance. It was basically, if you're going to have a kennel, you have to have a permit, and there's a fee, and then that was it.
Yeah, so the enforceability of that as far as the quality was probably less than optimal, so, okay, so with that, we'll hold this up for next month. If you guys want to
Do you need a
fine-tune them-
motion on that, Madam Chair?
No, if you guys are in agreement with waiting, we don't have to vote to wait, we'll just wait. And so if they want to get together and finish the fee and the language and whatnot, bring it back in January, and we'll hear it again then, if that works?
Okay.
Okay, so we're good with that. Item number 8 is discussion and possible action on ordinance creating section 8.08.115, restriction on the sale of animals. This is the one that we had talked about, and we ended up waiting for the kennel ordinance to take these together. This is, I believe, the retail animal sale pet store puppy mill type stuff. West, when it was up for vote in Weston, they called it a puppy mill ordinance, and it kind of was a deterrent to that. So, we held up on it because we knew we had the kennel stuff coming at the same time. But did Weston pass it? They've not yet.
No.
Okay.
And so I did make one change after talking with Becky to make it a little more clear, because before we had it titled something different and when about breeding, when really it's all just coming down to is just not selling the pets in the store. And so I kind of cleaned that up, and so that's hopefully now more clear of what the actual purpose of this ordinance was
Well,
trying to
and
do.
it looks like ours is also confined to dog and cat. Now, I saw today, we all got an email from a advocacy group talking about guinea pigs and rabbits. We were not intending to manage the sale of any of that, right? This is dog and cat only?
And
Rabbits are
Okay,
in
rabbit
there.
as well?
Yeah, that's it then. Cat, dog,
Okay.
and rabbit.
Well, and that's the thing, I guess. Why rabbit? I mean, that, to me,
I guess rabbit was picked because it's the other most common.
commonly milled animal? I mean, is
Yeah.
it something that,
The only argument I could see to that, thinking back to our discussions on what animals we allow in the city and that ordinance, is I do have quite a few rabbits, well, quite a few being maybe a handful a year, where we pick up a rabbit because somebody just released it.
oh, okay.
But you can also just, most farms and stuff, you can get rabbits too.
Right, so that's why I wonder. I mean, if I think our intention was to manage dog and cat and not all of these other things. I just, when I saw the email come from the interest group that was interested in, not restricting the sale of guinea pigs in stores. I mean, their argument there made complete sense. And, the rabbit too. I mean, people get them from private breeders. I think periodically you can probably get them in pet shops, but, that's totally different than, selling dogs and cats, which is where the mill issue seems to be pervasive. So I guess, what do you guys think about that?
Well,
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm all for not having puppy mills, but I think the assumption is that every retail store is a product of or an outlet for puppy mills, and I don't know if we have that evidence.
I don't think any of them are selling them here, right?
Well, we don't have any right now, right?
Right. Well, even the ones out of here, the ones that are in Rim Mountain aren't selling dogs and cats. They bring in adoptable animals, I think, right? But they're not selling them.
Which is what this ordinance would allow.
It does, because it's not, they work with a humane society to, and then it doesn't stay overnight. It's just there for a few hours of, hey, this is,
Viewing or whatever, and then,
this is Fido. He's here. So.
right. But then he goes back with a
He goes back.
volunteer. Yeah.
So that's different than what this is prohibiting. And yes, like you said, other person, Denny, right now we don't have any stores in Wausau that sell. The stores in Rib Mountain don't sell. This was just, I guess, another preemptive ordinance.
I think if this was confined to dog and cat, I think it would be probably easier to work with. So I guess rabbit seems odd to me to include. But, separate from that, I think this started in Weston because there was a business looking to set up shop to sell animals.
She did.
Yep, and so there was a volume of conflict, I think, between, her and her advocates versus their board. And we don't have any here yet, but, obviously we try to have some commonality between, what we consider, and that's where we got to this today. So, what do you guys think? Do you want to put this one on the books? You can actually, but you could do this one before the kennel because it needs less adjustment if you wanted to accept this one.
Yeah, and they really aren't related.
No, they just
They're-
happen to both be
yeah,
animal things at
they're
the
both
same
animal
time,
things,
so.
yeah.
You have comments, questions? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the ordinance removing rabbit out of
Okay.
there. So just for dogs and cats.
Dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the ordinance with the exclusion of rabbits. Is there a second? Second from McElhaney. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll show one opposed, two opposed. Are we all ayes?
I'm an aye.
You're an aye. Doug, are you an
Aye.
aye? Okay, so that's unanimous
I was
passage then.
late, just late.
Sorry, I was too quick. Okay, we're good. So that item passes unanimously. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending section 1.01.025, issuance of citations, and creating section 5.64.066, false or altered identification cards and misrepresentation of age. It sounds like this one comes to us with the circulation of fake IDs and things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that where we're kind of,
So, Cord Buckner at the PD, he gave me a call and said that that past weekend, an officer had wrote up somebody using a fake ID who was from a different jurisdiction, and they had something on the books for this, and then that's when they realized that we did not. And they said kind of in the past, when they would have something like this, they would use misappropriation of identification, which is a criminal thing, and it just seemed a little too extreme for this this type of thing. So he said, what can we do? So I said, well, we can have an ordinance basically copying the state statute of using a fake ID. We are allowed to do this. There's a provision that grants us this power. We can't, however, have an ordinance about the person making the fake ID, only the person either holding it or
using it? Okay,
Yeah,
so then that would
making it
be
is
a
criminal.
municipal violation that's a non-criminal type of
Yeah.
like a misdemeanor type thing, right?
Yeah, so those are the four, and Part C, the four different types of ways of getting, I guess, cited for using a fake ID. Carrying one, using, or giving fake information to get the ID, Yeah, so
Okay.
that's that. And I don't actually know how often this comes up, but it's just something that
Well,
we'd be able to then
And I
cite
think
for.
the, using it to gain access to a premises is one thing, but I think, once that, admission happens or the beverage gets served, that's totally different animal, and we already have rules for that, right? So, both for them and the bar, or whomever, so, I mean, I think of it in a bar setting, but I'm sure in any other area where you'd have to produce identification,
And
this makes some sense, so.
there are exemptions already for, serving underage. There are 4 exemptions that allow the bartender to basically say, well, hey, I checked his ID, it looked real to me, I shouldn't get in trouble. It's not my fault Timmy has a really good fake ID. And so we do have that. So, and I have actually used that in the past for courts when I have to then prosecute. So we do have that. We're not, I guess, putting any sort of bar on the hook for them doing their due diligence. So this is just
This would be
for
a
the
tool that
holder.
exists in the toolbox, basically, and they would have to decide, depending on the case that is in front of them, whether or not they use this citation tool, right?
Yep.
Or the other ones.
Yep.
Okay. What are your thoughts on this committee? Go ahead, Lou.
Who pays for the citation, the person holding it or the parent?
Well, it should be the person holding it, but I can't stop mommy and daddy from paying for
Okay,
Timmy's.
thank you.
Well, especially if the holder is 18 or 19, so,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, I do offer community service when I do prosecutions or whatever, when I have a minor, have them work it off. Depending on the parent, they are usually all in for that. We do have some parents that just say, oh, we're just gonna pay it. So there's nothing I can do about that.
all right. Go
So
ahead.
this seems to be altered or fake IDs. What about using somebody else's?
Same thing. That would be number 1, intentionally carries an official identification not legally issued to them. So them using their older brothers would be under number 1, or somebody that looks like them.
Okay, so the presenter gets fined, not the
Presentee.
borrower.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Because if, say, I made a fake ID for somebody, could be charged criminally. We're not touching that because it's not an ordinance that we can have. That would then be over at the.
But if I gave
circuit
you
court.
mine, so you could get in, because you don't look
Yeah, so
as
you
old
would,
as I am.
if I then used it, we could charge me here in municipal court, you could be charged criminally in circuit court.
Oh, okay.
So we only can do these 4 things and it's only related to the person using the fake ID.
So don't do it.
Yeah.
That's the rule. Okay, so.
Well, if you're gonna do one or the other, I guess this one is less serious, but that is not
In case
legal
anyone is
advice.
contemplating.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, I guess, what are your thoughts on this one, committee? Do we have a motion to approve this provision?
I would move to approve.
Motion from Denny, is there a second? Second from Hanky. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item 10 is the operations report from the fire department for the month of November, which is in the packets. Anything notable on the report that you would like to discuss with us, Deputy Chief Cobb?
There's a lot of information in there, and I'd
There
be
is.
willing to answer any questions if you guys had them. I guess the only thing I would add is, the monumental Safer grant where we're hiring 12 new firefighters, plus we were down 5 going into that, where a lot of places are finding challenges, which all of us are in hiring people. We've done a great job of getting to that number, and without any setbacks tomorrow, we should have all 17 on the books, so to speak, so.
Excellent. That is excellent. I mean, that's, when we first discussed it, we wondered if you'd find enough people, and that was a fantastic problem to have, and now you found them, so that's
And with the
excellent.
12 of them, we got to follow that 180-day rule that comes with the Safer grant, so we're well under that also. so.
Good, good, good. All right. And the Finance Committee had approved some allocations last week for equipment for them all, so we're on the right track. So we'll place that report on file if no one has questions on the fire department report. Then item number 11 is the tavern activities report for the month of November. Does anybody have any questions on the tavern report? Anything notable on the report that you would like to discuss with us, either chief or deputy chief?
No.
Okay. That was straightforward. It's a good month. Okay, and then item number 12 is the community outreach update. And so we have our community outreach coordinator with us, Tracy Rieger. Welcome. We had a couple conflicts since she started and we weren't able to have her with us, so welcome. It's great to have you here. If you could just give us a little update on how it's going.
Sure. So in the packet, I believe you have a report that I put together for the month of November. Based on the last committee meeting, I did review that and tried to get in front of you the numbers that you were looking for. So based on what you have in front of you, is this what you were looking to get in terms of shelter numbers and numbers of unhoused individuals in our community?
Specifically, Alder Denny, like you were like, let's look for metrics that we can measure success over time. And that's really what we tried to accomplish here, but we're also very open to, if we're not hitting that target for you, please let us know.
I do have a question then.
Okay, go ahead.
That
No, seriously.
regard, do we have any method, or have we been looking at what we would estimate as the current total homeless population? So is there a way to look at it and say maybe it's seasonal, I don't know.
Well, there's a point in time
If it
count.
goes- Point in time, correct, but so we only have that one per year that we can really,
Isn't it 2?
2. There's one in January and one in July.
okay.
So I think one thing to do here is just mental math with this, and some of it is based on observations and interviews. So we can look at how many people are being housed on a particular night in shelter and acknowledge them as unhoused individuals. And then, Tracy, in the work that she's doing, identifies people that are sleeping outdoors, not participating in that housing, and then asks them on a regular basis, like, how many more are there? I mean, they're in a better position to help provide us information. And that's where you receive estimates, like, I think it's 30 to 50, in addition to what you're seeing as individuals being housed.
So that's, your estimate would be 30 to 50 that you think are out there nightly, like right now?
For the month of November, my estimate is around 30. So I think that was a little bit less than the number that you had received at the last meeting, which was more of an estimate of 30 to 50. After, interviewing a few of the individuals that I've been working with who are currently still staying outdoors by choice, they were able to report that they estimated there to be about 30 people that they knew of sleeping outdoors with them in some capacity.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
I did ask for the shelter numbers, and I like the graph. That's what I was looking for.
Great. And then understanding that the numbers, the data is we're really in our infancy here trying to gather this. So some other metrics that we're looking at reporting out even as early as next meeting is, of the individuals that are presenting to shelter or not presenting to shelter, what are the reasons for not coming to shelter, if we can gather that data. But of the people trying to present to shelter, how many are being turned away on a given night? And what are the reasons behind that? Is it due to shelter capacity being reached? Is it due to behavioral issues within shelter where they've gotten strikes and are not able to go to shelter? So we are trying to gather that information as well, because I think that'll be really helpful to you as well to determine some trends.
I think it definitely will. I think that, we know that, as you go, you've had a number of success stories where you've been able to help people get on a path to a better place. I think that, when I read your section called Challenges and Opportunities, we know that there is ongoing challenges, both for case management, and I think that, as we start to look at, what that looks like. Can we get adequate case management help from NCHC? Is there an avenue where we can collaborate with other agencies that already do this work or are supposed to be doing this work to make that impact or to help you make that impact? I mean, we certainly don't expect you to do it all alone. And so, I think if we find that remains a continuous challenge, I mean, we know that there's some budget pressures that are happening within NCHC. We know that there's some staffing issues there. But, I think that the key organizations, key partner organizations that we know that we have to work with and have to look to, we need to also know really, I guess, what the state of our partnership is with those agencies. So, if it's a situation where, we're running into roadblocks in a process that should work, I think it's important for us to have that knowledge as well. We know that there's, depending on, where it is and what it is, I think those challenges will be different, but it's important to know that as well, I think, just so we can figure out, like, part of the reason for our success or lack thereof is going to be like, what kind of partners do we have? I mean, we as a city will never solve this completely by ourselves, so.
Sure.
I think it's
Go ahead, Matt.
important, it's important to highlight, just for anybody watching this, if you take all the numbers of unhoused individuals, it's 193. And this does not account for individuals that don't have stable housing but are successfully utilizing friends and sometimes termed couch surfing. But that number 193, we know to be less, because we have individuals that at any given time are sleeping outdoors, or they might have been housed during the last month at the Salvation Army and Catholic Charities. And what we don't think it's appropriate to do for those organizations is, we get their census data for the month. We're not going to cross-reference and reduce that, because 55 unduplicated individuals stayed at Salvation Army during this month. 72 unduplicated individuals stayed at Catholic Charities. We know that some of the 55 and some of the 72 stayed at each other's
Are the same
locations.
people.
Correct.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so we know that that number is less than 193. It just seems like a lot of effort to try and figure out what that exact number is. And I don't know that this is the right location
Well,
to.
and I think as a community,
shrink
though,
that.
it's good for us to know what the total need for shelter nights is. And, I think that we see, as far as like we'll call them, I guess, the care community, like, there's more than one agency doing this work, but there's more than one agency because there's a need for them all. But, I think if one person receives help from more than one agency, that's not necessarily a negative, but I think it does help us put together, at least put in perspective, that there's not 193 different people that are in need on a daily basis, because that really makes the task at hand much more magnified than it probably needs to be. Lou?
Yes, first I want to say thank you, Tracy, for the work you do in the community here. And my second question, or my question is how many of these 30 people that are placed that are living outside, let's say, how many of the 30 are doing this by choice?
If I could comment, I would say a majority of them are doing it by choice. There hasn't been, based on the daily census, there was only one night in the month of November that it reached 100% capacity at both shelters. So it's not due to them not having the ability to seek shelter. It's the ability to want to continue in the environment that they're in. So I would say that the majority of them are by choice.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's interesting for us, I think, to have that discussion, because just recently at a council meeting, we had another advocacy group show up and tell us, well, they're sharply critical of all of the efforts that we've made to date, which, I mean, we're making the best effort we can make at the speed that we're able to make it. But, that said, I think that, there was a sharp assertion that shelters, including the new CPC, just aren't big enough. Like, you can't build one big enough. But now knowing that some of this is duplicative, and the fact that, a choice gets made too by a number of individuals that, they're just not going to accept that hand up, and I've talked about the difference between a hand up and a hand out, and the hand up gets them on a better path. That's what our coordinator is doing. So I think that's important for us also to put in perspective as a group. So, Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, now that the weather's changed, I'd be interested to see how that might affect that. I guess just with the whole counts that we do twice a year, maybe go back 2 years if we can and do just 5 data points or something, and then continue on with that. I think that'd be another good one
Okay.
on the report.
To see if the trend is up or down.
Yeah, just to make it more public. I mean, I'm sure it's all public information, but
Sure.
if you ask me right now where to find it, I personally couldn't even tell you, so.
Sure. I can tell you that Catholic Charities has reported to me that their number so far this year is higher than it's ever been for this time of the year. So I would say that the trend looks like it maybe is on the upswing a little bit from where it had been. But there's a number of factors for that too, COVID and job loss and some other factors, so.
Sure. Do you know, has progress been made yet on the siting or the locating of the day services center? I know that they've been working on where to do it now that we've funded it, but, whether it be permanently or interim, because not all of the space at CPC is ready, right, for use, so.
Right, I mean, I don't know if Deputy Chief wants to comment at all. I do know that there's been some collaboration that's been happening within the city amongst Catholic Charities and another organization. But I don't feel like I'm really at liberty to kind of talk about that. I'm not really sure where
Well,
the
if
planning is
it's
at.
not committed yet, I don't know that we should necessarily
Yeah.
talk about it publicly, but I know that that's been in the works, and we've been trying to find a place to get those services rolled out as soon as possible, because
Yep.
that's another, leg of the stool, I guess, to get us where we need to be. I think when the mall went down, that was an indoor heated and air-conditioned space that a lot of people were in, and, that put a lot of pressure on other public structures once that building disappeared downtown. So, good or bad, it's gone. And so, people still, the people that needed it are still here. So that's just our reality. So any other questions or comments on the report? Doug, and then the chief.
Yeah, I think this fits here. So, there seems to be a little dichotomy here in our homeless outreach. There's, if you remember, a few weeks back or the last meeting, the deputy chief came to us looking for some guidance on enforcement. And so there's this enforcement piece as well as our services, whether that's placement or treatment. But I think this body needs to start looking at this data and be prepared to look at those questions. I feel that several calls this month on complaints at out on the island and at some other encampments. So some people are looking for enforcement, and my response is, where are they going to go? And most people are compassionate. They call, they want this gone, but then they don't want to be the enforcer, if you will.
Well, and it depends. I think sometimes it intensifies, once it becomes, and I guess I'll just say that some of the complaints where we heard the complaints were coming in the sharpest from some core neighborhoods, those same folks were not complaining until the encampment became visible along the walking trail in their neighborhood. But when it was in some other park or when it was under some other different bridge, there wasn't that same level of, I guess I'll say, veracity in the complaint. So, but, I guess with regard, we started to have a discussion about encampments, and, we know that come spring and summer, especially when things warm up, that is not likely going away unless our numbers are down. But from a policy standpoint, the policy is the policy. The law is the law. So, I don't feel that it's our place as a committee to tell the police department not to do their job. If the law says this situation exists, I don't know that it's important, it's appropriate for us to tell them to not do the job that we've made policy for. I think that if we're looking for different rules or different policy or different laws, we have the power to, rewrite, change, and amend things. But, for us to say this is the policy we made, but don't enforce it, or this is the policy we made, but get out there and do it, I think that really puts us in an awkward position. And like Doug said, right now, those people, the number one question in response is going to be, well, you can't be here. Well, where can I go? And when that answer is nowhere, there's no good answer, that really is a totally different scenario than when there's a menu of options. And so once there's shelter options and outreach options available, and there's facilities that can provide services on almost an immediate basis, that's a different conversation, because then you start to realize that some of these things are maybe happening by choice. If we've got this count of where it's happening by choice, if, that represents a large section of the 30 that we see on the bar graph here, we know what that's about. So,
Well, if it was 100% choice, enforcement would be pretty easy, because then we would give them other choices. But if they don't have choices, that's where the the hard part comes in. And I'd like to redouble our effort to go back to the county for some of their health department and social services capacity that we don't have here at the city. So we need to give time for these reports and these observations and your work to establish where we're going. But if the trend is more encampments, to me that's a trend that we have a growing problem, not a stable or a shrinking problem. So we need to be prepared to issue some guidance, and if we need to press on the county more, I think we should do that, because I don't, my sense is, it isn't getting better.
Well, it's not, but I also think with the size of the board and the large perception that some of these things are urban problems only, you'll have a cross-section of the board that likely carries a majority that believes it's a city problem and it's our problem. And that, when it comes to a funding request, often what I've seen happen over there is if it's not something that will benefit all, regardless of, location or size of the community, then it's a no. Even though, we occupy 11 seats on that body, and, a large portion of the revenue stream there comes from us as a county seat. I think sometimes when something is viewed as only an urban problem, it's very difficult to overcome some of those funding hurdles, at least on their side, from the board's point of view, because there is largely a rural majority. So they can be some tough conversations to have, not that we're afraid to have them, but I think we have to be realistic in what we think the result might be, because, it may be a no. So, but I guess, does anyone else have questions or comments or questions for Tracy about how things are going out there? We'll have her with us every month as long as she doesn't have a conflict, and just to see how things are going. Oh, Chief, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to answer the question about the day center for Catholic Charities. The mayor and I met with Roberto from the La Crosse Diocese of the Catholic Charities last week to discuss the ARPA agreement for the day center and year-round warming center, nighttime warming center. And we did discuss the day center, and they do have some ideas they're pursuing in terms of where to have them. One of them is their old location on 3rd Avenue. They still have a lease for that location, so.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that's where they're gonna have it, but they are actively searching out for a place for that location.
Excellent.
One just quick thing is we're looking for capacity, and you're thinking about choice. Most of our shelters, like both Salvation Army and Catholic Charities, they have rules for individuals, and many of the individuals have AODA-related issues. They have mental health, untreated, undiagnosed mental health issues. And so you're welcome to be at Catholic Charities, but if you're not behaving in an appropriate way and you get enough strikes, then like the first step is a 10-day suspension from using their facility. And then as those behaviors continue, then the length of suspension is greater. And I know that Salvation Army has expectations of those individuals staying at shelter. So like behavior can be a choice, but there are individuals that don't have shelter options to them. And we look forward to, I met with them today at Catholic Charities while doing a tour there, and asked for that data to be presented to you monthly. So you'll be able to see how many of the unhoused population are on secret probation suspension from shelter options.
Okay, and that was, and I guess some of the discussion that we've had also in, a variety of both with the task force that meets periodically, which it's coming up again tomorrow. Once we have that dialogue, one option that has come out in other communities, and it draws seriously mixed reviews when it comes up, is the concept of what people call a wet house. And, obviously that's something that is very difficult to place in certain areas and difficult to place in neighborhoods. But, I think we also have people come up and, are sharply critical of the fact that we've not adopted in complete form a housing first model, which includes something like that. I think those are options that, that task force is going to have to, I guess, talk their way through and see, what comes up in the community as far as whether or not, in some cases, those facilities allow consumption specifically because of the standards that exist in the others, and that really is the roof over the head and like the last stop, basically, when either the condition or the choice is such that there's no other option. So we don't have that here, but other communities have gone to something similar. Does it work? Well, I guess, but in good conscience, that person will never be to a better place that's there. So, but that task force is meeting again tomorrow. I'll be at that meeting tomorrow at 1:00. So we continue that work out in the community. So anybody else have questions for Tracy at all? If not, we'll place her report on file and see her back next month. So thank you for your input, though.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. The other item we have on our agenda, item 13, is communications. I have none. Does anyone have any communications? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Hanky, second from Denny. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nobody ever is. We'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.